Keep your hands where I can see them." The shout exploded across the bridge so sharply that even the rain seemed to hesitate. Red and blue lights bled across the wet concrete barriers while traffic stretched for nearly a quarter-mile behind the police blockade. Drivers leaned forward behind fogged windshields, trying to understand why 4 patrol cars had surrounded a single black SUV in the middle of Interstate 85. The woman inside the vehicle did not move right away. She sat perfectly still with both hands resting on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, her dark eyes fixed ahead through the streams of rain sliding down the windshield. Officer Tyler Grant tightened his grip on the flashlight in his shaking hand. "Captain," he muttered quietly into the radio clipped to his shoulder. "She's not responding." Captain Ryan Keller stepped forward through the drizzle, his heavy boots splashing against the slick pavement. Tall, broad-shouldered, jaw clenched tight beneath the flashing lights. He looked less like a police officer and more like a man preparing for a fight he had already decided he would win. 20 minutes earlier, dispatch had warned every patrol unit in the county about a suspicious vehicle possibly connected to a federal security threat moving southbound toward Charlotte. Black SUV. Government plates. Driver traveling alone. Keller had spent 15 years convincing himself his instincts never failed him. And now every instinct in his body screamed that the woman behind that windshield did not belong on this bridge tonight. "Ma'am," he barked again. "Step out of the vehicle now." Slowly, the driver's side door opened. A black woman stepped into the cold rain wearing a charcoal gray coat over dark slacks and low black boots dampened by the storm. She looked to be in her early 50s, poised, calm, with silver strands woven through tightly pulled curls near her temples. No jewelry. No panic, no sudden movement, just stillness. And somehow that unsettled Keller more than fear would have. Most people explained themselves immediately during a stop like this. Most people stumbled over words, over-apologized, or demanded answers. This woman simply stood there beneath the highway lights with rain collecting on her shoulders like she had endured far worse places than this bridge. "Hands higher," Keller ordered. She obeyed without speaking. Tyler noticed something then. Her posture, straight spine, chin level, eyes constantly scanning exits, barriers, sidelines. Not nervously, professionally, like someone trained to survive dangerous situations. "You traveling alone tonight?" Keller asked sharply. "Yes." Her voice came low and steady, untouched by the tension around her. "Where are you headed?" "North Carolina Memorial Hospital." Keller narrowed his eyes. "Purpose?" For the first time, something flickered behind her expression. Not fear. Pain. "My father is dying." A horn blasted somewhere deep in the traffic jam behind them. Rain hammered harder against the bridge. Keller ignored her answer completely. "Open the rear compartment." The woman turned slowly and pressed the button on her key fob. The SUV's rear hatch lifted with a soft mechanical hum. Tyler stepped closer with his flashlight and immediately froze. Inside the cargo area sat 2 black tactical cases, a folded communications antenna, military-grade maps marked with handwritten notes, and a secure radio unit with encrypted frequency tags attached along the side. Keller's entire body stiffened. "Well," he muttered coldly, "that explains a lot." Another officer moved beside him. "Captain, should we call Homeland?" Keller never took his eyes off the woman. Not yet. He stepped closer until rainwater dripped from the brim of his cap onto the pavement between them. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you're going to tell me exactly who you are and why you're transporting military equipment across state lines at 11:43 at night." The woman looked at him quietly for a long moment while distant thunder rolled beyond the bridge. Then, without the slightest crack in her voice, she answered, "You're making a very serious mistake, Captain." Rainwater dripped steadily from the edge of Captain Keller's cap as silence settled over the bridge again. Behind him, engines idled impatiently beneath the flashing emergency lights, their low mechanical hum mixing with distant thunder rolling across the Carolina sky. The woman never looked away from him. Tyler could not explain why, but the longer she stood there, the stranger the entire situation felt. She did not look trapped. She did not look nervous. If anything, she looked disappointed. Keller folded his arms tightly across his chest. "A serious mistake," he repeated with a dry laugh. "You are driving through an active security perimeter with encrypted communications equipment in your vehicle. You do not get to tell me what mistakes look like tonight." The woman inhaled slowly through her nose, steady and controlled. Then call Federal Command, she replied calmly. They will verify my identity. Keller's jaw tightened immediately. Something about the way she said it irritated him. Not because she sounded afraid, but because she sounded certain. Around them, rain tapped softly against metal guardrails and concrete barriers lining the bridge. Tyler shifted uncomfortably beside the open rear hatch. The tactical equipment inside the SUV looked expensive, organized with precise care. Nothing about it resembled criminal activity. No hidden compartments. No rushed packing. Everything sat perfectly aligned, labeled, almost military in its neatness. He swept his flashlight lower and noticed a folded American flag tucked carefully beneath one of the black cases. His stomach tightened slightly. Keller stepped closer to the woman again. Name: Vanessa Reed. Occupation. A brief pause followed. Not hesitation. Calculation. Government service. Keller smirked coldly. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you are authorized to receive at the moment. Tyler saw the captain's expression harden instantly. That did it. Keller had spent too many years around people who challenged authority, and he treated every calm voice like hidden disrespect. Turn around, he ordered sharply. Tyler looked up quickly. Captain. Keller did not even glance at him. I said turn around, ma'am. Vanessa Reed slowly placed her hands behind her back without protest. The metal cuffs clicked softly in the rain. Tyler swallowed hard at the sound. For a moment, the bridge seemed unnaturally quiet. No horns. No shouting. Just the soft hiss of tires rolling slowly through pooled rainwater behind the blockade. Keller guided her toward the hood of the SUV while another officer photographed the contents of the rear compartment. You know what I think? Keller said. I think you expected nobody to question you because of those government plates. Vanessa remained silent. I think people spent your whole life stepping aside because of whatever title you carry. Still nothing. Tyler noticed something then. Her hands, even cuffed behind her back, they remained perfectly steady. No shaking. No anger. No fear. He had seen veterans before. Men returning from overseas assignments. Firefighters after disasters. There was always something in the eyes afterward. A kind of quiet distance. Vanessa Reed had that same look now. Like this bridge was not the worst thing she had survived. Suddenly, one of the radios crackled loudly. All units remain alert. Possible threat level remains elevated. Keller grabbed the radio immediately. Copy that. Vanessa finally spoke again, her voice softer this time. Captain Keller. He looked at her sharply. How do you know my name? Your officers say it every 30 seconds. Rain slid down the side of her face as she lifted her eyes toward the dark skyline beyond the bridge. Listen carefully to me, she continued. If this checkpoint receives incoming fire, your patrol cars are positioned incorrectly. They are exposed from the eastern approach. Tyler felt a chill crawl up his spine. Keller stared at her in disbelief. You expect me to believe you are helping us right now? Vanessa looked directly at the youngest officer instead. Move the civilians farther back, she said quietly, and tell him to stop standing in front of the headlights. It destroys his night vision. Tyler froze completely. Slowly, he realized she was talking about him. Tyler instinctively stepped backward out of the headlights, his pulse suddenly thudding harder in his chest. Rain streaked across his flashlight beam, while the woman watched him with the same composed expression she had carried since the moment she stepped out of the SUV. Not proud, not afraid, just observant, like she had been studying every weakness on the bridge since the first patrol car arrived. Captain Keller noticed Tyler's hesitation immediately. Do not listen to her, he snapped. She is trying to manipulate the situation. Vanessa Reed lowered her eyes briefly toward the pavement glistening beneath the emergency lights. No, she said quietly. I am trying to stop your people from making careless decisions. Keller laughed once under his breath, but there was less confidence in it now. He grabbed one of the tactical cases from the rear compartment and dropped it heavily onto the hood of the SUV. Water splashed across the black metal surface. Open it. Vanessa looked at the case without moving. The latch requires federal authorization. Keller stared at her for a long moment before forcing the latch anyway. The case clicked open with a sharp metallic sound. Tyler leaned closer with his flashlight. Inside sat neatly organized communication equipment, encrypted tablets, laminated route maps, and a folded military jacket sealed carefully in clear plastic. Across the chest, illuminated by the rotating patrol lights, were silver letters stitched above the pocket. Read. Tyler felt his stomach tighten again. Keller reached for the jacket, unfolding it roughly. Rain touched the fabric instantly. Then his expression shifted. Barely, but enough. Tyler saw it. 4 silver eagles rested on the collar beneath the droplets of rainwater. Colonel. Nobody spoke for almost 5 seconds. Traffic lights blinked red in the distance while wind rushed across the bridge carrying the smell of wet asphalt and diesel fuel. Keller slowly looked back at Vanessa. Where did you get this? He asked. Her answer came immediately. The United States Army issued it to me. Tyler's mouth went dry. Another officer nearby lowered his radio slightly, eyes widening beneath the flashing lights. Keller forced a hard smile that looked more irritated than amused. Uniforms can be stolen. Vanessa gave a small nod. Yes, they can. Then she lifted her cuffed hands slightly behind her back. But protocol says before detaining an active field officer transporting secured federal communications equipment, you contact military command verification. Keller's jaw flexed tightly. You still have not explained why you are here. I already did. Her voice remained calm. My father is dying. The rain softened briefly into a cold mist drifting over the bridge. Tyler noticed something then. Exhaustion. It sat behind her eyes like a weight she had been carrying for days. She was not angry about the cuffs. She was not angry about the humiliation. She looked like someone racing against time. One of the patrol officers approached Keller carefully. Captain, dispatch says Federal Command keeps redirecting the verification request. Keller frowned. What does that mean? It means somebody high up flagged the line. Vanessa finally closed her eyes for one slow breath. Of course they did. Keller stepped closer immediately. What does that mean? She opened her eyes again. It means this checkpoint was not supposed to stop me. The wind suddenly intensified across the bridge, rattling loose construction signs against the concrete barriers. Somewhere behind the blockade, a black SUV with dark tinted windows slowed briefly before continuing past the backed-up traffic below the overpass exit ramp. Vanessa noticed it instantly. Tyler noticed her noticing it. Her entire posture changed. Subtle, but immediate. Every muscle sharpened beneath the soaked gray coat. Captain, she said quietly, how many officers are stationed on the eastern access road tonight? Keller frowned. Why? Vanessa stared into the darkness beyond the bridge lights. Because you are all watching the wrong vehicle. Captain Keller turned sharply toward the eastern side of the bridge, just as the dark SUV disappeared beyond the rain and traffic below. For the first time all night, uncertainty flashed across his face. It vanished almost instantly beneath irritation. You expect me to believe this is some kind of setup? He asked coldly. Vanessa Reed watched the distant roadway without blinking. I expect you to stop letting your assumptions slow down your judgment. Tyler noticed Keller's fingers tighten around the military jacket, still damp from the rain. Around them, the checkpoint suddenly felt unstable, like the entire situation had tilted a few degrees off-center. Officers who had sounded confident minutes earlier now exchanged uncertain glances beneath the pulsing patrol lights. Dispatch radios crackled constantly, with overlapping chatter from units across the county. Somewhere farther down the interstate, another siren screamed through the storm. Vanessa lifted her cuffed hand slightly. If that vehicle exits onto Route 16, you lose visual coverage in less than 90 seconds. Keller stared at her. How would you know that? Because I helped design emergency containment routes for this region 3 years ago. Tyler felt the air leave his lungs slowly. Keller looked ready to dismiss her again, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the rain dripping steadily from the silver eagle insignia on the jacket. Maybe it was the way every answer she gave sounded precise instead of defensive. Or maybe it was the growing realization that the woman standing handcuffed beside the SUV understood this checkpoint better than the officers running it. One of the radios suddenly burst alive again. Unit 7, possible black SUV matching secondary alert entering Route 16, access road. Repeat, secondary alert confirmed. Every officer on the bridge turned instantly. Keller grabbed the radio. How long ago? Approximately 30 seconds. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, like someone hearing confirmation of a problem she already expected. Keller looked at her again. What is in that vehicle? I do not know, she answered honestly. But I know this checkpoint was never the real target. Wind swept rain sideways across the bridge hard enough to rattle the temporary barricades. Tyler wiped water from his forehead and looked down at Vanessa's cuffed wrists. The metal restraints suddenly felt wrong now. Not legally wrong. Morally wrong. He could not explain it better than that. Keller paced once across the slick pavement, thinking fast now. Pride and uncertainty battled visibly across his face. "Captain," Tyler said carefully, "maybe we should verify her credentials before." Keller spun toward him immediately. "You think I do not know how to do my job?" Tyler stepped back. "No, sir." But Vanessa spoke before Keller could continue. "Your young officer is trying to help you." Keller looked at her sharply. "You do not get to coach my team." "No," she replied calmly. "But somebody should." Silence fell again. The rain softened into a low mist drifting beneath the bridge lights. Far below, headlights moved slowly along the interstate like streams of white and red flowing through darkness. Vanessa looked exhausted now. Tyler saw it more clearly the closer he stood to her. Not physical weakness. Emotional fatigue. The kind carried by people who spent years solving problems nobody else ever noticed until it was too late. Keller finally exhaled hard through his nose. "Fine," he muttered. "Run the federal verification again." The officer at dispatch nodded and stepped away toward his patrol car. Vanessa tilted her head slightly toward Tyler. "How long have you been on the force?" Tyler blinked. 8 months. "You still pay attention to details." He did not know how to answer that. Keller overheard the exchange and looked annoyed again. But before he could speak, headlights suddenly appeared through the rain from the far side of the bridge. Fast. Black SUVs. 3 of them, moving together in perfect formation. Tyler's stomach dropped instantly. The lead vehicle accelerated straight toward the checkpoint, while sleek black tires hissed across the rain-soaked pavement. Every officer reached for their radios at once. Vanessa Reed did not move at all. She only looked at the approaching convoy and quietly said, "Finally." The convoy stopped so abruptly that water sprayed across the bridge in wide silver arcs beneath the emergency lights. 3 black SUVs sat motionless now at the edge of the checkpoint, engines humming low and powerful against the rain. Every officer on scene instinctively shifted position. Tyler felt his pulse hammering in his throat as the rear passenger door of the lead vehicle opened. A tall man stepped out wearing a dark military raincoat with no umbrella despite the storm. His posture alone changed the atmosphere instantly. Calm, controlled, dangerous in the quietest possible way. 2 more personnel exited behind him, both carrying secured communication cases clipped to their shoulders. Captain Keller stepped forward immediately. "This checkpoint is restricted," he announced loudly over the rain. "Identify yourselves." The tall man barely looked at him. His eyes locked directly onto Vanessa Reed standing beside the SUV with handcuffs still around her wrists. Everything about his expression hardened at once. He walked forward slowly, polished black shoes splashing through shallow rainwater across the pavement. Then he stopped. Tyler watched the man's shoulders straighten sharply before he spoke. "Who authorized restraints on Colonel Reed?" "Nobody," answered immediately. Keller folded his arms. "And you are?" The man reached calmly into his coat and removed a federal credential wallet. Gold lettering flashed beneath the bridge lights. Department of Defense. Keller took the identification, but Tyler noticed his confidence wavering now. Just slightly. "Deputy Director Marcus Hale," the man said evenly. "National Strategic Operations Command." Tyler saw 2 officers nearby exchange nervous glances. Hale looked past Keller toward Vanessa again. "Colonel, are you injured?" "No," Vanessa answered quietly. "Just delayed." Hale's jaw tightened. Rain rolled down the side of his face while he looked directly at the cuffs still locked around her wrists. "Remove them." Keller did not move. "We detained her based on a statewide alert involving federal equipment and suspicious movement patterns." Hale stepped closer. "And before detaining a senior field officer, did you complete military verification?" Keller hesitated half a second too long. Tyler noticed it immediately. So did everyone else. Hale exhaled once through his nose, disappointed more than angry. "Captain," he said quietly, "do you understand who you placed in restraints tonight?" Keller lifted his chin stubbornly. Apparently somebody important. Vanessa finally turned her head slightly toward him. That was never the issue. The rain softened into mist drifting beneath the patrol lights while traffic continued crawling slowly behind the barricades. Tyler suddenly became aware of how many civilians were filming. From their vehicles now. Phones glowed behind wet windows all across the bridge. Hale removed a sealed folder from beneath his coat and handed it directly to Keller. You interrupted an active federal operation. Keller opened the folder slowly. His face lost color almost immediately. Tyler could not read the documents from where he stood, but he saw bold red markings stamped across the pages. Classified. Restricted movement authorization. Federal security priority. Keller looked back up at Vanessa Reed differently now. Not suspiciously. Carefully. Like someone finally realizing the ground beneath him was far less stable than he believed. Vanessa stood perfectly still despite the rain soaking through her coat sleeves. Tyler could not stop staring at her expression. No satisfaction. No revenge. Just exhaustion. Hale noticed it too. Colonel, he said more softly now, we have transport ready. Your father's condition has worsened in the last hour. Something changed in Vanessa's eyes then. Not dramatic. Not visible enough for most people to notice. But Tyler saw it. The quiet control she had maintained all night cracked just slightly around the edges. She lowered her gaze for one brief second toward the wet pavement. How much time? She asked. Hale answered carefully. The doctors are not sure. Silence swallowed the bridge again. Even Keller seemed unable to speak now. Slowly, Hale extended his hand toward the cuffs. Tyler immediately stepped forward with the key before anyone asked him to. His fingers trembled slightly as he unlocked the restraints from Vanessa's wrists. The metal clicked open softly beneath the rain. Vanessa rubbed the red marks gently without complaint. Tyler swallowed hard. Ma'am, he said quietly, unable to meet her eyes completely. I am sorry. Vanessa looked at the young officer for a long moment. Then she gave the smallest nod. You listened, she said softly. That matters. Behind them, Captain Keller stood frozen beneath the flashing red and blue lights, while rainwater dripped steadily from the classified documents still shaking slightly in his hands. The bridge no longer sounded the same after the cuffs came off. A few minutes earlier, the air had been filled with commands, radios, and suspicion. Now there was only rain and the low hum of idling engines beneath the glow of flashing patrol lights. Vanessa Reed stood beside the open SUV, rubbing warmth back into her wrists while water rolled from the edge of her gray coat in thin silver streams. Tyler remained close by without speaking. He could not stop replaying the night in his head. The assumptions, the shouting, the way every officer, including him, had looked at her before they knew who she was. Deputy Director Hale quietly handed Vanessa a dry communications tablet from one of the convoy vehicles. The hospital called again, he said softly. Vanessa stared at the screen for a moment before accepting it. Tyler looked away instinctively, feeling suddenly as though he were intruding on something personal. The bridge lights reflected across the wet pavement, while distant traffic crawled forward inch by inch behind the barricades. Somewhere farther down the interstate, thunder rolled low through the dark Carolina hills. Vanessa listened silently to the message on the tablet. No one could hear the voice except her. But Tyler noticed the subtle change in her face almost immediately. Her jaw tightened once. Her eyes lowered. Then she closed the screen carefully, like someone trying not to let emotion spill into the open air around strangers. Hale stepped closer. We can have you airborne in 12 minutes. Vanessa nodded slowly. He waited this long. I just need him to wait a little longer. Her voice remained calm, but the exhaustion underneath it sounded heavier now. Captain Keller stood several feet away near the patrol cars, isolated despite being surrounded by his officers. Rainwater soaked through the shoulders of his uniform, while the classified folder remained tucked tightly beneath his arm. Nobody approached him anymore. Not because they feared him, because the energy around him had changed. Tyler noticed it clearly now. Confidence had disappeared from the captain's posture, replaced by something quieter and harder to hide. Shame. Keller finally stepped forward toward Vanessa. Each step sounded muted against the rain-soaked pavement. Hale watched him carefully, but did not interfere. Vanessa turned slowly to face him. For a moment, Keller seemed unable to find words. The flashing red and blue lights reflected across his face in uneven waves, while passing headlights painted long white streaks across the bridge barriers behind them. Colonel Reed, he began quietly, I made assumptions tonight. Vanessa said nothing. Keller swallowed once before continuing. I saw the vehicle, the equipment, the alert. and I stopped seeing the person standing in front of me. Rain drifted sideways between them. Tyler lowered his eyes toward the pavement, feeling the truth in those words settle heavily across the entire checkpoint. Vanessa looked at Keller for a long moment without anger. Somehow that made it harder for him. Fear changes how people see things, she said softly. But prejudice changes what they choose to ignore. Keller's expression tightened immediately. He looked away toward the stalled traffic stretching across the bridge. I have spent 20 years wearing this badge, he admitted quietly. Tonight was the first time I realized how quickly authority can blind someone. The wind swept colder across the bridge now, rattling the temporary barricades again. Tyler noticed several civilians still filming from their vehicles, their phone screens glowing faintly through rain-covered windows. Vanessa followed his gaze briefly. Most people will only remember the moment the cuffs came off, she said. They will not remember why they went on in the first place. Keller looked like the words physically struck him. He opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. Nothing sounded sufficient anymore. Hale checked his watch quietly. Colonel, we need to move. Vanessa nodded once. Before turning away, she looked back toward Tyler. You listened when others stopped listening, she told him softly. Do not lose that. Tyler felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. He nodded once without trusting himself to speak. Vanessa stepped toward the waiting convoy while rain continued falling steadily across the bridge. Behind her, Captain Ryan Keller remained standing beneath the flashing patrol lights completely. Motionless, holding authority in his hands for the first time in his career without feeling proud of it. The convoy pulled away from the bridge with quiet urgency, black tires hissing across the rain-soaked interstate, while patrol lights slowly faded behind them in streaks of red and blue. Vanessa Reed sat alone in the rear passenger seat of the lead SUV, her damp coat folded beside her and the secure tablet resting dark in her lap. Outside the window, North Carolina blurred past in silver reflections and shadowed trees bending beneath the storm. Deputy Director Hale sat across from her reviewing updates on another screen, but even he seemed careful not to disturb the silence surrounding her now. Vanessa leaned her head lightly against the cool glass for one brief moment. The exhaustion she had held back all night finally settled visibly across her face. Hale lowered the tablet slowly. The doctors stabilized him once, he said quietly. There is still a chance. Vanessa gave a faint nod, though her eyes remained fixed on the dark highway outside. My father used to tell me storms always sound worse from the outside, she murmured softly. He would sit on the porch during hurricanes like they were concerts. Hale smiled faintly. Sounds stubborn. Very. The convoy accelerated past a line of slow-moving traffic. Rain tapped steadily against the windows while the city lights of Charlotte began glowing faintly on the horizon ahead. Back on the bridge, Captain Ryan Keller still had not moved much from where Vanessa left him. Most of the checkpoint had already been dismantled. Officers loaded barricades into trucks while dispatch units redirected the backed-up traffic lane by lane. But Keller remained near the patrol cars, staring at the wet pavement where the handcuffs had fallen open less than 30 minutes earlier. Tyler approached, carefully holding 2 cups of stale vending machine coffee from a nearby service station. Sir. Keller looked up slowly. Tyler handed him 1 cup. Steam curled weakly into the cold air between them. Thank you, Keller muttered. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Rain continued falling softly now, less violent than before, almost peaceful against the concrete bridge rails. Tyler finally broke the silence. I did not know who she was either. Keller stared into the dark coffee. That is the problem. Tyler frowned slightly. Keller exhaled heavily through his nose. We should not need somebody to be important before we treat them with dignity. The younger officer lowered his eyes immediately. Somewhere behind them, one of the patrol officers quietly turned off the last flashing barricade light. The bridge suddenly looked smaller without the chaos from earlier. More ordinary. Keller rubbed one hand across his tired face. Do you know what I keep thinking about? Tyler shook his head. She never raised her voice once. The words lingered heavily in the cold air. Keller looked out across the interstate where civilian traffic now flowed steadily again beneath the fading storm clouds. Not when we stopped her. Not when we cuffed her. Not even after we embarrassed her in front of half the county. Tyler swallowed hard. She probably understood exactly what was happening the moment we pulled her over. Keller nodded slowly. That is what bothers me most. Several miles away, the convoy reached the outskirts of Charlotte Memorial Medical Center. Hospital lights reflected pale gold across the rain-covered streets, while emergency helicopters sat motionless on the rooftop landing pad above. Hale looked toward Vanessa carefully. The family liaison team is waiting inside. Vanessa straightened slightly, gathering herself again with practiced discipline. But before the convoy fully stopped, her secure tablet suddenly lit up with an incoming priority message. Hale's expression changed instantly when he saw the sender identification. "Colonel," he said carefully, "that is from Federal Command." Vanessa opened the message. Her eyes moved across the screen once, then again slower. The silence inside the SUV deepened immediately. Hale studied her face. "What is it?" Vanessa lowered the tablet gradually into her lap, while rainwater continued sliding down the dark hospital windows outside. "The vehicle from Route 16, she said quietly. "They found it abandoned less than 10 miles from here." Hale's posture stiffened, and Vanessa looked toward the glowing hospital entrance ahead, her expression suddenly sharper despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "It was never running from the checkpoint," she whispered. "It was heading here." The convoy stopped beneath the emergency entrance canopy while rainwater streamed steadily off the edges of the hospital roof in silver curtains. Nurses pushed carts through automatic glass doors glowing pale against the dark storm outside. Somewhere overhead, a helicopter beacon blinked slowly through the low clouds hanging above Charlotte Memorial Medical Center. Vanessa Reed stepped out of the SUV without waiting for anyone to open the door for her. Her boots touched the wet pavement, and for the first time all night, she hesitated. Not from fear, from weight. The hospital looked ordinary to everyone else. But to her, it was the place where time was running out. Deputy Director Hale moved beside her immediately. "Federal teams already secured the building perimeter," he said quietly. "Local law enforcement has not been informed yet." Vanessa nodded once while staring through the glass entrance doors. "Good." Hale lowered his voice further. "If the Route 16 vehicle was heading here, then somebody knew your father was vulnerable tonight." Vanessa's expression darkened slightly. "Or somebody knew I would come." Inside the hospital lobby, warm air wrapped around them carrying the scent of disinfectant, coffee, and exhaustion. A television mounted above the waiting area silently replayed weather updates about the storm crossing the Carolinas while families sat slumped in chairs beneath dim, midnight lighting. Nobody recognized Vanessa Reed as she walked through the lobby in a damp gray coat with silver strands glimmering faintly in her hair. To everyone else, she looked like another tired daughter trying to reach someone she loved before it was too late. A nurse approached, carefully holding a tablet against her chest. "Colonel Reed." Vanessa nodded. "Your father is stable for now, but the doctors asked that only immediate family enter the room." Vanessa thanked her softly and started toward the elevators. Then she stopped suddenly. Her eyes moved across the lobby toward the far glass doors facing the parking structure outside. Hale noticed instantly. "What is it?" Vanessa did not answer right away. Her posture sharpened again with the same quiet awareness Tyler had noticed back on the bridge. She stared at a man standing near the vending machines wearing a dark baseball cap pulled low over his face. Nothing about him looked threatening at first glance. But he was not watching the television. He was not using his phone. He was watching the elevators. Specifically, her elevator. Hale subtly touched the radio hidden beneath his coat. "You know him?" Vanessa shook her head slowly. "No," then her eyes narrowed slightly. "But he knows me." The man turned casually and walked toward the parking structure exit before security could intercept him. Vanessa immediately stepped after him. "Colonel," Hale warned quietly, "do not." But Vanessa was already moving through the lobby. Calm, fast, focused. The automatic doors opened with a soft hiss as cold rain-filled air rushed back inside. Outside, parking garage lights reflected across the wet concrete in long distorted streaks. The man disappeared around the corner toward the lower-level ramps. Hale signaled 2 federal agents who moved quickly after him. Vanessa stopped near the edge of the garage entrance, studying the shadows carefully. Then she noticed it. Parked 3 spaces from the elevator access stairwell sat the abandoned black SUV from Route 16. Rainwater rolled slowly down the windshield while the engine ticked softly beneath the hood from recent use. Hale stepped beside her, stunned. "How did it get here this fast?" Vanessa's eyes scanned the garage levels above. "Because it was never escaping us," she said quietly. It was waiting. One of the agents approached the SUV carefully and checked the interior through the fogged glass. "Vehicle is empty," he called out. "No driver." Vanessa stepped closer slowly. The hospital lights reflected across the wet pavement around her feet, while distant thunder echoed through the open concrete levels overhead. Then she saw something tucked beneath the windshield wiper. A folded photograph. Hale removed it carefully and handed it to her. Vanessa stared at it in silence. It was old, faded around the corners. A younger version of her stood beside an older black man, smiling proudly in military dress uniform beneath bright summer sunlight. Her father. On the back, written in black ink, were only 5 words. "You were easy to find." Hale looked up sharply toward the dark parking levels above them. But Vanessa remained perfectly still, holding the photograph in trembling fingers for the first time all night. Rain drifted softly through the open levels of the parking structure, while Vanessa Reed stood motionless beneath the pale fluorescent lights, holding the old photograph in her hands. Water slid from the edges of her coat onto the concrete floor in quiet drops. Around her, federal agents spread carefully across the garage levels, checking stairwells, parked vehicles, and dark corners where shadows clung between support columns. But Vanessa barely noticed any of it now. Her eyes remained fixed on the picture. She could still remember that afternoon. Fort Bragg. Summer heat rising off the pavement. Her father standing beside her in dress uniform after her promotion ceremony, smiling with the kind of pride that made a person feel taller just standing next to it. Hale watched her carefully. "Colonel," he said quietly, "we should move you upstairs immediately." Vanessa nodded faintly but did not move right away. Instead, she turned the photograph over once more, studying the handwriting beneath the fluorescent lights. "You were easy to find." No anger. No threat. Somehow that made the message worse. Calm people frightened her more than loud ones ever had. One of the agents returned from the lower parking level, breathing hard from the search. "No visual on the suspect," he reported. "Vehicle was wiped clean. No plates. No prints." Hale muttered something under his breath and pressed a hand against the radio hidden beneath his coat. Vanessa finally folded the photograph carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of her coat. Then she looked toward the hospital elevators glowing quietly at the far end of the garage. "I am done letting tonight steal more time from my father," she said softly. The elevator ride upstairs felt strangely silent after the chaos of the bridge and the parking structure below. Warm hospital light reflected softly against brushed steel walls, while the distant sound of rolling carts echoed faintly through the late-night corridors. Vanessa stood beside Hale with her hands folded calmly in front of her now, but exhaustion rested heavily beneath her eyes. The kind that no amount of military discipline could completely hide anymore. When the elevator doors opened on the cardiac floor, the smell of antiseptic and stale coffee greeted them immediately. Nurses moved quietly through dim hallways while monitors beeped softly behind half-closed patient doors. A doctor approached them near the nurses' station. "Colonel Reed." Vanessa nodded once. "He has been asking for you," the doctor said gently. Something in Vanessa's face softened immediately at those words. Not the colonel, not the strategist, just a daughter hearing her father was still waiting. She thanked the doctor quietly and walked down the hallway alone. Her boots sounded soft against polished hospital floors while rain streaked slowly across the dark windows lining the corridor beside her. Room 814 waited at the very end beneath dim overhead lights. Vanessa paused outside the door for one brief second before entering. The room smelled faintly of medicine and rain carried in from the storm outside. Her father lay resting beneath thin white blankets, older and smaller than the man in the photograph downstairs. Gray hair, deep lines around tired eyes. But when he saw her standing in the doorway, he smiled immediately. "There she is," he whispered weakly. Vanessa crossed the room quickly then, finally letting the composure crack just enough for emotion to reach her eyes. She sat beside him carefully and took his hand between both of hers. "You took your time getting here," he murmured softly. Vanessa laughed once through the tightness in her throat. "Traffic." Her father smiled faintly at that. Outside the hospital window, rain rolled down the glass while distant city lights shimmered across the wet Charlotte streets below. For a while neither of them spoke. They simply sat together listening to the quiet rhythm of the heart monitor beside the bed. Eventually her father looked at the faint red marks still visible around her wrists. His tired eyes sharpened slightly. Somebody forget who you were tonight? Vanessa looked down at the marks briefly before answering. No, she said softly. They forgot who they were. The old man studied her face for a long moment, then squeezed her hand gently despite the weakness in his own. Do not carry their shame for them. Vanessa lowered her eyes as silence settled warmly around the room again. Down below, the storm was finally beginning to clear over Charlotte. The flashing police lights were gone now. The bridge stood empty again. And somewhere in the city, people who had spent their lives feeling invisible might one day hear about a quiet black woman in handcuffs who never raised her voice once.